And joining us now, great to welcome the author of a very fascinating book about how our food, a lot of our food anyway, came to be that we eat. It's called The Food Explorer, The True Adventures of the Globe-Trotting Botanist Who Transformed What America Eats. We're joined today by Daniel Stone. He's a staff writer for National Geographic, also a former White House correspondent for Newsweek and the Daily Beast, and he joined us by telephone today. Daniel, good to talk with you. How are you?
Thanks for having me.
Big difference covering food than covering the White House, I imagine.
It's quite a change, yeah, but everything's related in some way.
I guess it is, yeah. First of all, congratulations on the book, but a nice article. I'm from New York originally, and I get the New York Post on the weekends, and you had a nice article on the Post over the weekend about the book, so that's helpful.
Yeah, I'm thrilled with the reception. People seem to be genuinely surprised at the work of David Fairchild and how he traveled all over the world and found exotic fruits and vegetables that are now part of our daily lives.
You go into food stores now, especially the last maybe 10 years, you look at all the produce section, you can't believe how many choices you have. And, when I was a kid, there was, a lot there, but it wasn't like it is today. So that food comes from somewhere. Somebody had to decide to bring it here, right? And he was one of those guys. Or was he the first?
Yeah. He was, yes, definitely one of the first. When you think of U.S. history, of America, very few foods are native to our country. The apples that we eat are from Kazakhstan, and the bananas are from New Guinea. Oranges are from China, right? So very few things existed here, and they had to be brought here over the course of the past couple centuries. David Fairchild was the first person tasked and given the work of a government spy to go around the world and find what amounted to economic secrets of crops that could grow in America and become rival industries.
First, before we get into his story a little bit, how did you get interested in doing this biography of him?
I learned about him as the son-in-law of Alexander Graham Bell. David Fairchild married Graham Bell's daughter. And I heard him described as an adventurer botanist, and I just thought that was such a remarkable title for anyone to have that I dug into him. I dug a little deeper. I found some of his family. I found his journals and his diaries and his travel memos, and started to piece together the story of this man and the work he did that continues to have effects in American supermarkets.
Did he keep pretty accurate and extensive journals that you could go back and look at, or did you have to kind of talk to some people, or how'd you do it?
He did. Yeah, he kept a lot of good records. I mean, this was before email, of course,
right.
Before even phones, and he wrote everything down. He kept all of his correspondence. He filed it alphabetically. And two generations full of librarians and archivists kept a lot of this material. A lot of it is down at the Fairchild Tropical Botanic Garden in Florida that has a room full of all of his letters, all of his memos, and all of his diaries. So I started there and quickly found even more in other parts of the country and even parts of the world.
And the book, goes into details. He really had an adventurous life. Some of it a little unpleasant, right? He got sick a few times, right? Got some weird diseases and arrested. So he had a lot of adventures, didn't he?
Oh yeah, he got arrested. It said on his first assignment he was getting Corsican citron types of lemons in Corsica in the Mediterranean, and gets arrested. He caught diseases. He caught a typhoid fever while traveling in the Indian Ocean in about 1901. He was shot at by island tribes in Malaysia and in Indonesia, people who were very wary of outsiders. And he paid a visit to Fiji, where there were still real-life cannibals. Fiji's nickname used to be the Cannibal Islands. And Fairchild visited at the end of that era and sees some of the remnants of a culture that practiced cannibalism.
How did he, I think you mentioned, the cuttings of, I guess, whatever fruit or vegetable it is, but how did he get it back into the United States, those samples, and how did they stick here? I mean, how did he do that?
Sometimes it was seeds, sometimes it was cuttings, buds, roots. He would take whatever part of the plant he thought had the best chance of surviving a month or two long voyage on the boat. And he would pack it on damp moss and damp towels. Once he would stick buds into potatoes that could nourish a plant for the month ahead. But yeah, the plants would then arrive in Washington, where they'd be inspected, they would be propagated and grown, and then distributed across the country to field stations and experiment stations across the country, and then given to farmers. And so it was a distribution network of agricultural material. And when you think of pork from Washington, when you think of the government working for the people, this was one of the earliest ways that the government really worked for the people. It distributed seeds to farmers who were a majority of the labor force and helped them enhance their fields and grow their businesses.
Yeah, because you mentioned in the book, a lot of farmers, if the crop wasn't something they could make some money with, they didn't even bother growing it after a while, right? So they had to be convinced, didn't they, that this would be make money for them.
It was very fragile. Farmers don't like to take risks, right? Farming itself is a risk. How much is it going to rain? How much is actually going to grow? So farmers don't like growing new things. So Fairchild really had to do his homework with finding a new crop. Where does it grow? What kind of conditions does it need? How much water? How much sunlight? How much heat is too much heat? And so he'd take all these notes and he'd send them back to the U.S., and then farmers would have to be educated in places like the American Southwest that started growing dates that Fairchild had picked up in Baghdad. So he had to really make sure that the transition was seamless. And it sometimes worked. A lot of the times it didn't work, but it took a decade or more to really create a new industry of a food.
And some of those you mentioned already, avocados he brought from Chile, kale, which seems to be the superfood of today. That was actually kind of a throwaway, wasn't it, in Croatia? They didn't even think it was that good, right? Or something that big a deal.
No. For most of kale's history, it was a peasant food. It was a fruit. It was a type of spinach that grew really easily. It almost was hard to stop it from growing. It grew in really salty soil, and everyone ate it. So Fairchild brings it back. And for most of the 20th century in the U.S., it was mainly used as garnish, right, as decor on salad bars and in fruit bouquets. Only after some nutritional research and scientific research in the 1980s and the 90s, combined with a marketing campaign, did kale kind of go the way of quinoa and avocados, becomes a superfood far into its life than at the very beginning.
Did David Fairchild, after he did this, I guess he seemed to have a pretty good life, right? Or what was kind of after he brought these things back? Did he continue to do that, or what did he do?
He brought a lot of these things back. Then, when he got a little older, he hired a team of younger men to continue this work, one of whom he sent to Central America to find even better avocados. One went to Russia to find new strands of wheat. And one, a man named Frank Meyer, he sent to China to literally walk across China, where some of the hardiest crops in the world were believed to be hiding inside the interior of the country. So Fairchild becomes kind of a government traffic cop with a team of explorers all over the world and gives them direction and receives their seeds and tries to introduce even more crops into American farms and American markets.
Yeah, fascinating book, fascinating story about an interesting man who hopefully more people get to know now when they read it. It's called The Food Explorer. David Fairchild is the food spy, he was called, and we've been talking with Daniel Stone about the book. Do you have a website, Daniel, you can direct people to?
Sure, it's danielstonebooks.com, or you can buy the book wherever books are sold.
Great, we'll have a link on our website as well. But Daniel, pleasure talking to you. Hopefully we can do it again, and thanks for being with us today.
Thank you for having me.
I'm Stan Brock. 30 years ago, I formed Remote Area Medical to help people overseas. But then we found generations of families in America isolated by poverty from the health care they need. Together, we can take dental, vision, and medical help to 1 million adults and their kids, right here at home in the United States of America.
If you'd like to order the book we're talking about, please go to DougMilesMedia.com and enter the author's name in the Amazon search box. Thank you for listening. Please come back soon for more conversations here at DougMilesMedia.com. This has been a presentation of Doug Miles Media, all rights reserved. You can listen to or download previous programs at iTunes, Stitcher.com, or DougMilesMedia.com.